The radio hissed once, then a hand slid into view, trembling, soaked in blood. A young police officer tried to breathe, but couldn't. His eyes searched the darkness, not to beg for help, but to make sure he hadn't been abandoned. Veteran Raymond Cole dropped to his knees beside him. No hesitation, no questions. Hands steady, shaped by battles that never truly ended. Beside him stood K9 Max, closer than breath itself, pressing his body against the man who was slowly slipping away. Then something changed. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, intentional, and on the ground. An object that should never have been there, still warm. For a moment, the officer's lips moved, just enough to whisper, "Don't leave me." That sound had been heard before, in other places, on other nights. And suddenly, this was no longer just about saving a life. A deeper truth was beginning to surface, with all communication cut off and danger lurking somewhere in the darkness. Raymond was forced to make a choice: chase the attacker or stay and keep the officer alive. Before we begin, share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and tell us where you're watching from. We truly want to see how far this story can travel. Now take a deep breath, relax, and don't forget to subscribe to Healing with Max so you don't miss more powerful stories of courage like this one. The sound came before understanding, not loud, not sharp enough to explain itself. Just a brief rupture in the air that made Max react before the man beside him did. The German shepherd's head lifted in one clean motion, ears rigid, body angling forward as if pulled by a signal only he could hear. A half-second later, the radio crackled, fractured, uneven words slipping through static and losing their shape before they could land. "Officer down. Possible ambush. Sector 9. Then nothing. Not silence. Worse than silence. Absence. Raymond didn't speak. He slowed the truck without realizing it, one hand tightening on the wheel while the other hovered near the radio, waiting. The static breathed again. Short, shallow bursts, like lungs struggling to pull in air. He didn't turn it off. He let it run, listening the way he used to listen in other places, counting the space between sounds, measuring what wasn't being said. Max shifted beside him, nails scraping once against the floor, then going still. When the radio finally died for good, the night felt heavier, closer, as if it had leaned in to see what would happen next. He turned toward the industrial lot before his mind finished deciding. Old habits guided his movements, checking the mirror, adjusting his grip, lowering his breath. Max leaned forward now, tension running through his frame, scenting something urgent, something wrong. Gravel spat under the tires as Raymond parked hard at the edge of the lot, engine still running. The door opened. Max surged forward, the leash snapping taut for a single heartbeat before Raymond released it. Waiting had never saved anyone. They crossed the distance fast. No sirens, no flashing lights. Only the overturned cruiser lying on its side like a discarded shell, metal warped inward, glass scattered across wet pavement. The smell reached them first. Oil, blood, rain mixing into something that settled in the back of the throat. Raymond dropped to one knee beside the wreck, breath fogging in the cold, eyes sweeping the ground in tight, practiced arcs. His hand brushed against the metal panel near the door. Cold. Slick. He pulled back without looking at his glove. Max circled wide, nose low, tracking something Raymond couldn't see. He completed one full pass around the cruiser, then another, slower this time. On the second circle, he stopped short near the rear of the lot, body stiffening, tail lowering just a fraction. Raymond followed his line of sight, scanning the darkness beyond the vehicle, the stacked crates and empty loading bays pressing in like silent witnesses. For a moment, Raymond wondered if the officer was still inside the car, trapped somewhere he couldn't reach in time. The sound that followed was barely sound at all, not pain loud enough to demand attention, not a cry, just air forced past lips that didn't have much strength left. A whisper. It came from behind a rusted dumpster at the edge of the lot, thin and uncertain, like it might vanish if noticed. Raymond turned toward it slowly now, posture lowering, every sense narrowing. His boots splashed through shallow puddles, each step measured. For a brief moment, so brief it barely registered, he wondered if it was memory playing tricks on him, if the night was handing something back that belonged to another place, another time. Max moved ahead of him without command, placing himself slightly in front, then stopping. He didn't growl, he didn't bark. He simply stood there, holding the space, as if confirming that what Raymond heard was real. Officer David Hale lay half in shadow, half in rain, young, mid-20s, pale beneath the weak spill of a streetlight that flickered as if undecided. Blood pulsed steadily between his fingers, dark against the uniform fabric, the vest torn near the hip where the wound hid its worst truth. His breathing was shallow and uneven, each inhale working harder than the last. His eyes flickered when Raymond knelt beside him, searching Raymond's face not for answers, but for presence, for proof that someone had arrived. Raymond pressed hard against the wound, fingers firm, precise, his body moving on memory older than thought. Femoral artery, bad angle. Too much blood has already been lost. He reached for the radio again, voice low and exact, shaped by training that never really left him. Static answered. Nothing else. He adjusted his grip, pulled off his jacket, folded it tight, and forced it into place to add pressure. His jaw tightened. Time ticked somewhere he couldn't see. Max lowered himself beside Hale, not in a trained position, not guarding, not alert. He lay down carefully, shifting once, then again, adjusting his weight until his body blocked the wind and his warmth pressed fully against the young man's side. His breathing slowed deliberately, deep and even, offering Hale something steady to follow. The dog's amber eyes stayed locked on Hale's face, calm, unwavering. Raymond noticed the pale scar along Max's shoulder, a remnant of another night when retreat had not been an option. Hale's lips moved. The sound barely made it out. "Don't leave me." The words struck Raymond deeper than the wound itself, not because of fear, but because of recognition. He leaned closer, lowering his forehead until it nearly touched Hale's, voice controlled, anchored, meant to hold rather than reassure. "You're not alone." The phone buzzed once against Hale's chest, muffled by soaked fabric. Max's ears twitched. The screen lit briefly, just enough to show a name, then went dark again. Raymond didn't reach for it. Some messages arrived too late to change anything, but not too late to matter. He checked his watch. 20 minutes, if help was even coming. Too long. The rain thickened, tapping softly against metal, the sound steady and indifferent. The lot seemed to draw inward, shadows stretching, the night pressing closer. Raymond adjusted his position, careful not to break pressure. His shoulders ached in a familiar way. He remembered other hands under his once, other voices asking the same question in the same tone. The years fell away for a moment, leaving only breath and weight and the quiet promise of staying. Max stiffened. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his head and fixed his gaze toward the deeper dark beyond the dumpster. A low growl rolled from his chest. Not loud, not panicked, but sharp with certainty. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. Footsteps followed, measured, approaching. Wrong. Raymond tightened his grip on Hale's leg. He didn't look up yet. He didn't move Max away. Whatever was coming could wait one more second. This man would not be alone. The night had left a mark neither of them could name. Raymond crouched low behind the shadow of the overturned cruiser, flashlight dark in his hand, breath measured to keep it from fogging too thick in the cold air. The rain had eased, but the ground still held the damp weight of what had fallen, every sound carrying farther than it should have. Max stood just ahead of him, muscles tight beneath his coat, body coiled in a way Raymond recognized from long years together. This was not ready to attack. This was restraint, sharpened by judgment. A shape moved near the cruiser's far side. Slow, careful. A man, tall enough to be unmistakable, shoulders squared beneath a dark jacket, one hand holding a pistol low while his eyes scanned the ground with practiced intent. He did not rush. He did not call out. His boots avoided the broken glass as if he already knew where it lay. The light caught his face for half a second, and Raymond felt something inside him tighten. He knew that face. Sergeant Clay Turner stepped into clearer view, rain tracing thin lines down his jaw, the badge on his chest dulled by shadow. Once that badge had meant something Raymond trusted. Once, the man wearing it stood beside him without question. Now Turner's posture carried a different weight, less certainty, more edge, like someone who had crossed too many lines and could no longer remember where the first one was. Raymond did not raise his weapon. He did not move Max back. He leaned forward just enough for his silhouette to be seen, his voice low and steady when it finally came. "Clay, don't." Turner stopped. For a breath, nothing moved but the rain sliding off metal. Then his head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing, recognition settling into something colder. His reply came even, stripped of warmth, shaped by choice rather than impulse. "You should have stayed retired, Ray. The kid saw something he shouldn't." Max's growl rolled out low and controlled, a warning that did not ask permission. Turner's grip tightened. The moment stretched thin, balanced between memory and decision. Then the standoff shattered in a single flash. One shot cracked the air, sharp enough to sting the ears, glass exploding outward from the cruiser's window. The bullet found nothing living. Turner was already moving, turning, vanishing into the maze of storage crates beyond the lot. Footsteps quickening, then gone. Raymond didn't chase. Raymond watched Turner disappear between the crates, his instinct pulling him forward for half a step, then stopping. He shifted his grip on Hale, testing whether the body could be moved. The blood surged instantly, bright and unstoppable, spilling faster the moment Hale's weight changed. Raymond pressed down harder, jaw tightening. On roads like this, movement killed quicker than bullets. Turner wouldn't be waiting for sirens. He'd be waiting for motion. So Raymond stayed where stillness gave the wounded man his only chance. He turned back to where Hale lay behind the dumpster, the world narrowing again to blood and breath and time. Hale's skin had gone ashen, the pulse beneath Raymond's fingers weaker now, less certain. Raymond pressed harder, shifting his weight, folding the jacket tighter against the wound. His shoulders hunched, as if he could shield Hale from the night by force of will alone. Max followed without command. He lowered himself again beside Hale, closer this time, his head resting near the young man's shoulder, breath slow and deliberate. The dog's eyes flicked once toward the darkness where Turner had disappeared, then back to Hale, choosing without hesitation where he was needed most. Hale's eyelids fluttered, struggling to stay open. His breathing stuttered, then steadied slightly, drawn into rhythm by the warmth beside him. Raymond leaned closer, his presence firm, grounding, the way he had learned to be when words only got in the way. "Stay awake. Tell me about her." Hale swallowed, throat working. His eyes shifted, focusing inward now, as if reaching for something bright enough to hold on to. "Her name's Nora. She's expecting." The words landed softly but carried weight. Raymond felt it in his chest, the future pressing close, fragile and unfinished. Max shifted again, nudging closer, his body a barrier against the cold, his quiet presence offering something no human could teach. As Hale drifted, half-conscious, his hand twitched weakly near his vest. Raymond noticed the movement, not purposeful, but insistent, as if the body remembered something the mind was losing. He followed the gesture, fingers brushing the soaked fabric, feeling beneath the torn edge. Something stiff pressed back against his glove. Paper. No. Plastic. A folded report, edges softened by moisture, names visible through smeared ink. Raymond didn't read it fully. He didn't need to. The signature at the bottom was enough. Clay Turner, again, and again. Dates clustered close together, too close to be coincidence. Hale hadn't just stumbled into trouble. He had been walking straight toward it. Max lifted his head suddenly, nose brushing Hale's vest with purpose. He pawed once, gentle but precise, then nudged again. Raymond followed the cue, fingers sliding under the vest's edge, finding the small, hard shape lodged where it shouldn't have been. A memory card, cracked along one corner, damp but intact, wedged tight as if hidden there in a moment of instinct rather than plan. The body camera itself was gone, stripped away. But the truth, whatever shape it took, had stayed behind. Raymond closed his hand around the card without looking at it, the weight of it heavier than its size suggested. He tucked it away, movements careful, deliberate. Max watched him, eyes steady, as if confirming that the choice had been made. The sound reached them slowly, distant at first, then clearer. Sirens, more than one. Raymond lifted his head, listening past the hope that wanted to rise too quickly. Something was off. The pitch was wrong. The rhythm is uneven. No lights cut through the rain, no familiar voices called out. Max's ears flattened slightly, his gaze shifting toward the sound, then back to Raymond. The dog did not relax. He did not rise. He stayed exactly where he was, pressed against Hale, anchoring him to the ground, to the moment. Raymond tightened his grip on Hale's leg, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the lot as the sirens drew closer without revealing themselves. Whatever was coming next was not simple, not clean. The night had not finished speaking. The silence had weight now, the kind that pressed inward and refused to leave. They moved Hale into the warehouse without speaking, away from the glare of headlights that turned pain into spectacle. The door slid shut behind them with a sound too loud for a place meant to hide, and then the darkness took over, swallowing edges, flattening distance. The air inside was cold and stale, thick with the smell of rust and old oil, a space forgotten long enough to feel wrong for anything living. Raymond felt it immediately. This was not shelter. It was a waiting room. Max circled the perimeter once, then again, nails tapping softly against concrete. His ears lifted at every creak above them, every shift in the beams, every whisper of air moving through gaps in the metal walls. He was alert, but restrained, not searching for threat so much as listening to the space itself, as if the building were trying to tell him something. Raymond followed the movement with his eyes, grounding himself in the familiar rhythm of the dog's patrol, while everything else felt unsteady. The radios were still dead. Raymond checked them anyway, thumb pressing the button out of habit more than hope. Static answered, thin and empty, a reminder that no one was coming because no one could hear them. He pulled out his phone next, watching the screen light up his hand and nothing else. No bars, no signal, just time slipping quietly past. Hale's breathing had slowed, each rise of his chest taking longer than the last. The blood beneath Raymond's hands was still warm, slicking his gloves, soaking through the fabric he'd packed tight against the wound. His arms burned from the pressure, shoulders locked in a position he'd learned years ago and never unlearned. This part of him still knew exactly what to do, even as the rest of him wanted to look away. Raymond had been in rooms like this before. Different walls, different floors. The same sense that the world had narrowed down to a single body and a single choice. He remembered the cold of concrete against his knees, the smell of antiseptic mixed with iron, the way hands slipped when there was too much blood and not enough time. He remembered voices calling out names that never answered back. Remembered how silence came after, heavy and permanent. Those memories lived just beneath the surface, never gone, only waiting. Max lowered himself beside Hale again, closer than before, his body angled to block the drafts slipping through the seams of the building. His breathing slowed deliberately, deep and even, a steady presence that refused to rush what could not be rushed. His eyes stayed on Hale's face, watching for changes so small a human might miss them. The rest of the warehouse no longer mattered to him. Raymond looked down at Hale and felt something tighten in his chest. The boy's face was pale, too young to carry this much weight, lashes damp against his cheeks. His breathing stuttered, then caught, drawn into the rhythm Max offered beside him. Raymond leaned in, voice stripped of everything but truth. Too many. The words surprised him as they left his mouth, not because they were false, but because they were finally unguarded. Hale's eyes flickered at the sound, recognition passing through them like a small light. A faint smile tugged at one corner of his mouth, then faded as his breath slipped out slow, almost peaceful, as if something heavy had finally been set down. For a moment, Raymond thought Hale was asking permission to let go. Then Hale's gaze shifted, not to Raymond, but past him, toward the steady weight pressed against his side. His hand lifted weakly, barely clearing the floor, pointing not at the door or the dark corners of the warehouse, but at the dog who had not moved since they came inside. Don't leave him. He knows. The words landed differently than Raymond expected, not as a plea, but as certainty. Something inside him shifted, quiet and final, and he felt the past stir in a way he had learned to fear. He looked at Max again, really looked this time, and saw what the night had been trying to tell him all along. The way Max had angled his body toward Hale from the moment they found him. The way his ears tuned to Hale's breathing before it changed. The familiarity in his stillness. The absence of hesitation. This wasn't trust being formed in crisis. This was memory waking up. Raymond noticed the pale scar along Max's shoulder again, thin and old, a mark from another time. With it came a flash of memory that wasn't his own. A training yard under flat afternoon light, gravel warm beneath boots. A younger Hale standing straight, voice calm and unraised, giving commands that carried certainty rather than force. Max, leaner then, responding not with urgency but with ease, tail still, eyes bright. The dog had learned that voice before Raymond's ever became his anchor. He had learned loyalty there, in repetition and patience, long before this night asked him to prove it. Hale wasn't a stranger fighting to survive. He was family. The realization settled heavy in the space between them, and then the world shifted again. Raymond felt it first, the sudden absence beneath his fingers. The pulse that had been weak but present slipped away, leaving nothing but stillness. For half a second, he didn't understand what his hands were telling him. Then Max did. The dog's body went rigid, breath catching as if the air itself had left the room. A sound tore free from his chest, raw and unguarded, rising and falling once before echoing off the metal walls. It wasn't a call for help. It was grief. Raymond reacted without thought, pressing harder, adjusting his weight, hands moving with desperate precision. Blood slicked his palms, smeared across his sleeves, the effort burning through his arms as he refused the finality the silence offered. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath with him, the dark pressing close, waiting to see what he would choose. Then, something changed. At first, Raymond thought it was his imagination, a trick played by hope. He froze, listening with his hands, afraid to name what he felt in case it vanished. A faint breath stuttered back into existence beneath his palms, shallow and uncertain, like the world testing whether it was welcome again. Not gone. Not yet. Raymond stayed exactly where he was, adjusting nothing, breaking nothing, holding on to the fragile return as if it might disappear if acknowledged. Max lowered himself again without command, pressing close, his breathing settling back into the steady rhythm that had worked before. The silence shifted, losing its weight, becoming watchful instead. Max's ears lifted sharply, his head turned toward the far end of the warehouse, where a door sat half-hidden in shadow, its outline barely visible against the dark. He rose in one smooth motion, body angled, attention locked. His breath changed, the calm cadence tightening into readiness. He barked once, short, sharp, final, aimed straight at the door. Raymond didn't look away from Hale. He didn't move his hands. But he felt the night gather itself on the other side of the walls, felt the quiet give way to something patient that had decided it was time to be seen. Whatever had been circling them had come back. The night had narrowed everything down to one breath, one choice. The sound at the door wasn't what Raymond expected. Not the sharp crack of a gunshot. Not boots charging forward. It was slower than that. Uneven, dragging metal scraping lightly against concrete as someone leaned too hard on the frame. Raymond had already pulled a steel rack across the warehouse entrance, its weight grinding into place with a protest that echoed through the hollow space. His hands shook as he finished, not from fear alone, but from exhaustion that had nowhere left to hide. Max stood directly in front of Hale, legs braced, chest broad, eyes fixed on the door. The dog didn't growl, he didn't bark. He simply held his ground, a living line drawn between what remained of a man and whatever was coming next. When the door shifted again, it opened just enough for a figure to stumble through. Clay Turner didn't come in shooting. He came in limping. Rain soaked his jacket, darkened the fabric down one side where blood spread unevenly from his shoulder. His breathing was rough, pulled in short, broken pulls that made his chest rise at odd angles. One hand pressed hard against the wound, fingers slick and trembling. The pistol hung loose in the other, lowered more by fatigue than mercy. This wasn't an ambush anymore. It was something unraveling. Raymond kept his gun low, finger off the trigger, eyes never leaving Turner's face. He saw it then. The crack in the armor, the strain around the eyes, the way Turner's posture had collapsed inward like a man carrying something far heavier than the weapon in his hand. Thunder rolled outside, distant but growing closer, and the broken roof let rain bleed through in thin lines, streaking light down the walls and across the three figures frozen in place. Turner's knees nearly buckled as he took another step forward, the pain finally catching up with him. His mouth moved before the words came, breath rasping as if the truth itself was hard to carry. He wasn't supposed to die. The sentence didn't land like an excuse. It landed like regret that had nowhere left to go. Raymond didn't raise his voice. He didn't advance. He stayed where he was, weight evenly balanced, letting the question hang between them. Then why start this? Turner's grip failed. The pistol slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor, spinning once before coming to rest near the wall. He stared at it, as if surprised it had ever been there at all. Rainwater pooled at his boots, mixing with blood that dripped steadily from his shoulder, marking time in dark spots on the concrete. His jaw tightened, then loosened, the fight draining out of him in slow degrees. Outside, the wind rose, pushing rain harder through the gaps above them. The storm pressed close, rattling the building, forcing the night into every corner. Turner sank to his knees, the movement careful, deliberate, as though sudden motion might shatter what little control he had left. His head bowed, shoulders trembling under the weight of words he had held too long. They owned me. Raymond felt the shift immediately. This wasn't a confession born of fear. It was a surrender born of exhaustion. Turner spoke again, but softer now, the edge dulled by something that sounded dangerously close to grief. He didn't explain who they were. He didn't need to. The way his hands shook said enough. The way his eyes avoided the dark beyond the door said more. Max stepped forward. Not in attack, not in warning, just one step, placing himself squarely between the two men, his body broad, steady, immovable. Rain dripped from his fur, his breath visible in the cold air, slow and even despite the chaos pressing in around them. His presence changed the space, drew a line that neither man crossed. He didn't look at Turner. He looked at Raymond, as if waiting. Turner noticed him then. Really noticed. His gaze softened, something unguarded flickering across his face as he watched the dog stand there, unwavering, unafraid. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by a quieter memory that pulled at the corners of his expression. He's loyal, doesn't know how to quit. Raymond's answer came without thought, low and certain, shaped by years of knowing exactly what that kind of loyalty cost. He learned that from someone. The words settled heavily between them. Turner's shoulders sagged, whatever resistance he had left draining out with the rainwater soaking into the floor. He shifted his weight, careful not to collapse, eyes finally lifting toward Hale where he lay motionless behind Max. The sight seemed to undo him completely. His voice broke, the last of his strength giving way. "Help him, please." Raymond didn't respond. Not because he wouldn't, but because he couldn't afford to stop what his hands were doing. He was already back at Hale's side, pressure firm, movements precise, every sense narrowed to the fragile rhythm beneath his palms. Max returned to his position without command, settling close, his body a shield against the cold that seeped in from the ground and the open seams above. The storm intensified, thunder cracking close enough now to rattle dust from the beams overhead. Rain poured through the broken roof in heavier streams, streaking the space with shifting light that made faces appear and vanish in the same breath. Raymond's arms burned, his grip tightening as fatigue clawed at him, threatening to slow movements that couldn't afford hesitation. Hale's skin had cooled. His breathing, already shallow, began to falter, the pauses between breaths stretching longer, heavier. Raymond leaned closer, listening not with his ears, but with his hands, feeling for what might already be slipping away. His jaw clenched, a familiar ache blooming in his chest, the old knowledge that sometimes doing everything right still wasn't enough. Max's breathing changed, quickening just slightly, his body tensing beneath Raymond's touch. The dog knew before Raymond did. He always did. The pulse vanished. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden stillness, no moment the world announced itself changed. 1 second it was there, weak, fragile, stubborn, and the next it was simply gone. Raymond froze, disbelief flaring sharp and immediate. His hands didn't move. They hovered, waiting for something that didn't return. The world seemed to draw inward, the sound of rain dulling, the thunder retreating as if the night itself had stepped back. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but the absence beneath Raymond's fingers and the weight of every moment that had led here. Max stayed. He didn't howl this time. He didn't bark. He pressed closer, his body firm against Hale's side, breath steady, refusing to let the space empty out completely. His eyes never left Raymond's face, holding there with a quiet insistence that cut through the shock. Raymond swallowed hard, the ache in his throat tightening until it burned. His hands began to move again, slower now but no less determined, counting, pressing, refusing the finality that hovered just out of reach. Rain fell harder, thunder cracking overhead, the storm bearing down as if to test how much they could endure. Turner watched from where he knelt, silent, blood still dripping from his shoulder, the truth of his choices written plainly across his face. Whatever had brought him here had already taken more than it would ever give back. Raymond didn't look at him. He didn't look at the door. He stayed exactly where he was, hands working, breath measured, choosing stillness over fear one last time. The night held its breath. For 10 long minutes, no one spoke. The warehouse seemed to shrink around the small space where Raymond knelt, his hands moving with mechanical precision, pressing and releasing, pressing again. He counted silently because counting gave shape to time, and time was the only thing he was still fighting. Each number landed heavier than the last, slipping through his thoughts like water through broken ground. The rain outside thinned to a distant murmur, as if the night itself had stepped back to watch. Raymond's arms burned, the ache settling deep into muscle and bone. His fingers adjusted, searching for something they already knew was gone. No pulse answered him. No warmth pushed back. He counted anyway. He had learned long ago that stopping was a kind of surrender, and surrender always came too early. His breath came slow and controlled, fogging faintly in the cold air before dissolving again. Somewhere behind him, Turner did not move. Somewhere beyond the walls, sirens remained absent. The silence grew heavier. Raymond lost his place once, then again, and had to begin from the start. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Losing the count meant losing the thread that kept panic at bay. He pressed harder, jaw clenched, forcing his focus back into his hands. This was how it always felt at the edge, time stretching thin, the body demanding more than it could give, memory pressing in where hope had no footing. Max stayed close, his body low, eyes fixed on Hale. The dog did not pace or whine. He watched with a stillness that carried intent, as if listening for something beneath the surface of the world. Raymond noticed the way Max's ears shifted, the subtle lift of his head, the attention sharpening rather than fading. It was the same posture Max had taken before, years ago, in other places where breath had grown uncertain and the ground had offered no mercy. Raymond leaned closer, his forehead hovering near Hale's. The young officer's skin had cooled, the color drained to something unnatural, and the sight of it pulled at something old and buried in Raymond's chest. He pressed again, slower now, gentler, as if care itself might coax life back where force had failed. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with exhaustion finally demanding its due. Still nothing answered him. That was when Max moved. No command guided him, no training explained it. Max stepped forward with quiet certainty, placing his paws carefully between Raymond's arms, mindful of where weight fell. He climbed over the space Raymond had held for himself and lowered his body across Hale's chest, stretching out fully, warmth settling where cold had taken hold. Max's breathing slowed, deep and even, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that belonged to memory more than instruction. He stayed there, unmoving, as if the act itself carried meaning beyond obedience. Raymond froze. His hands lifted instinctively, unsure where they belonged now. For a brief moment, frustration flared, sharp and helpless, before dissolving into something like recognition. He had seen this before. Not here, not like this, but close enough to make his chest tighten. Max had done this once, long ago, with another body, another night, when staying had been the only thing left to give. Raymond's fingers brushed Max's shoulder, a reflex rather than a command, and then stopped. Max did not turn, did not shift. He pressed closer instead, sharing heat, sharing the quiet weight of presence. Raymond's breath caught as he realized what the dog was offering. Not a solution, but a refusal to let the space empty too soon. Time passed in stretched seconds, each one threatening to tip into finality. Raymond leaned in, heart pounding loud enough to drown his thoughts. Then something changed. It began as a subtle movement beneath Max's chest, so slight it might have been imagined. Max lifted his head just enough to adjust his weight, ears angling forward, attention sharpening. Raymond bent closer, his world narrowing to that single point of contact. A thin sound followed, rough and uneven, dragged from lungs that had forgotten how to work. Hale coughed once, shallow and weak, pulling air into his body with a sound that cracked the silence wide open. Raymond's reaction came before thought. His hands returned to Hale, lighter now, guiding rather than forcing, feeling the faint pulse flutter back beneath his fingers. A monitor crackled to life, its first tentative tone cutting through the air. Then another, steadier than the last. Max shifted just enough to allow breath to come more freely, then settled again, refusing to leave until the rhythm held on its own. The moment broke something open inside Raymond. A laugh escaped him, raw and disbelieving, carrying equal parts relief and disbelief. He bowed his head for a fraction of a second, the weight of what almost was pressing in before giving way to what still could be. His hands trembled as he steadied them against Hale's side, grounding himself in the reality of movement, of breath, of sound. Across the room, Turner slid down the wall, the fight draining out of him all at once. He did not speak. He did not look away. He watched Max lying across Hale's chest, watched the life return where he had expected an ending, and something in his expression fractured. His shoulders shook as he pressed his palms against the floor, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. Whatever justifications he had carried into the night found no place to stand here. When the sirens finally came, they sounded different. Clean, purposeful, undeniable. Lights cut through the broken doorway, washing the warehouse in white and blue, chasing shadows back into the corners. Real medics moved in with practiced calm, their presence shifting the air itself. One of them paused for half a breath when he saw Max, eyes flicking from dog to man, recognition passing without words. Then they took over, hands sure, voices steady, replacing Raymond's effort with efficiency born of repetition. Raymond stepped back only when told, his body protesting the sudden stillness. He watched as Hale was secured, oxygen flowing, color slowly returning where none had been moments before. Max followed the gurney without command, his pace measured, eyes never leaving Hale's face. Turner stood when they came for him, offering no resistance, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding in front of him. The cuffs closed around his wrists with a soft, metallic sound that felt final in a way bullets never had. Outside, the rain eased further, thinning into mist. As they wheeled Hale toward the ambulance, Max stayed close, matching the movement step for step. At the threshold, Max paused. He pressed his muzzle gently to Hale's hand, lingering there as if memorizing the warmth. Hale's fingers twitched, barely perceptible but enough. Max lifted his head then, turning to Raymond with a look that held certainty rather than question. They had stayed. That was the point. The ambulance doors closed, the vehicle pulling away as sirens faded into the distance. Raymond remained where he was, the cold finally reaching him, now that the urgency had loosened its grip. Turner was led past him, head lowered, no words exchanged. Raymond did not watch him go. His attention was drawn upward instead, toward the thinning clouds and the faint light gathering beyond them. The first hint of sunrise slipped through the breaks in the storm, pale and cautious, touching wet pavement and fractured metal with something almost gentle. It did not erase the night. It did not promise absolution. But it revealed what remained. Truth laid bare, choices made, loyalty proven not through action, but through refusal to leave. Raymond rested his hand on Max's back, feeling the steady warmth beneath his palm. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes following the slow arrival of light. After a night that had asked everything of them, the world offered something back. Not answers, not forgiveness. Just the quiet certainty that staying had mattered. And for the first time since the radio had gone silent, Raymond allowed himself to breathe. Weeks later, spring came early, not with celebration, but with permission. The last of the snow withdrew along the edges of the paths, leaving damp earth exposed and breathing again. Thin blades of green pressed through where winter had lingered, patient and unannounced. The air carried a softness that did not ask to be believed, only noticed. Raymond came to the rehabilitation center every morning before the grounds fully woke. He parked in the same place, walked the same stretch of gravel, and paused at the same turn where the building opened into light. The routine mattered more than arrival. Max moved beside him with an easy confidence, tail low, steps unhurried, no longer scanning for angles or shadows. The doors opened quietly, and the day began without urgency. Hale sat in the garden when Raymond found him, shoulders angled toward the sun. The scars were visible now, pale lines tracing what the night had taken and returned. His hands rested on his knees, weak but steady, practicing patience in small increments. He reached for a leaf that had fallen onto the bench, fingers closing around it with care, the motion slow and deliberate. Max watched without interfering, settling near his feet, a calm weight that asked nothing. They shared the space without filling it. Raymond stood a little back, hands tucked into his jacket, noticing how Hale's breathing deepened when Max leaned close. Recovery showed itself in these details, the steadier set of shoulders, the way effort no longer shook the entire body. Progress did not announce itself. It revealed itself when no one was looking. For Raymond, the quiet arrived differently. Each morning, the absence pressed first. No radio crackle. No call that split the air and pulled him forward before thought could catch up. The stillness felt unfamiliar, almost unearned. He noticed his hands at rest, not reaching for equipment that was no longer needed. At first, the peace made him uneasy, as if he were forgetting something important. Then, slowly, it taught him where to place his attention instead. Max adjusted too. In the warmth of late morning, he stretched out in a patch of sun and slept, chest rising and falling without tension. A cart rattled in the distance. Max did not lift his head. Leaves stirred along the path. His ears did not flick. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Vigilance loosened its grip. Rest became possible. Nora arrived one morning carrying their newborn son, wrapped close against her chest. She moved carefully, not from fear, but from instinct reshaped overnight. The baby stirred when Max shifted nearer, a small response that brought a quiet smile to her face before she realized it. She watched Hale, alive, altered, and the dog who had stayed when nothing else could. When her gaze met Raymond's, she offered a single nod, slight and steady, and he returned it without words. Raymond stepped back to give them space without distance. He noticed how Hale straightened just a fraction, how Nora's shoulders eased when Max settled nearby. The child's fingers curled and uncurling, responding to warmth rather than sound. The moment required no commentary. It asked only to be held. Before the bells rang, Raymond reached into his jacket pocket and felt the edge of an old radio, the casing scuffed, the dial long since silent. He turned it once in his hand, thumb tracing a familiar groove, then set it down on the bench beside him. He did not look back when he stepped away. Some things he had learned did not need to be carried forward to be honored. In the distance, church bells rang for the first time since the accident. The sound drifted across the grounds, unhurried, carrying neither celebration nor warning. Just acknowledgement. Raymond listened without turning toward it, letting the sound pass through rather than over him. It felt less like an announcement and more like a marker, a line drawn gently between what had been endured and what would be tended. Hale looked up, eyes clearer than they had been in weeks, and Raymond met his gaze. There was gratitude there, and recognition, and the shared understanding of how close the edge had come. When Raymond finally spoke, it was only once, and it was enough. Neither did he. The words settled between them and stayed. As afternoon tilted toward evening, the light softened. Max rose, circled once, and lay down between the two men, one young, one old, and the child who would never remember the night that almost took his father. His body stretched comfortably, claiming the space with quiet confidence. He rested his head near Raymond's boot, close enough to feel, not close enough to ask. Raymond eased onto the bench, joints protesting before settling. He placed a hand on Max's back and felt the steady rise and fall beneath his palm. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes half closed, present without vigilance. Hale watched them both, the scene imprinting itself without effort, the way moments that matter often do. Around them, the world moved gently. A nurse crossed the far path without hurry. A breeze lifted the leaves and set them down again. The air held stillness without silence, life without demand. Raymond breathed it in and let it reach places he had guarded for too long. He thought of the warehouse, the rain, the counting that had refused to stop when hope had thinned to almost nothing. Those memories did not vanish. They found their place. Healing, he understood now, was not forgetting. It was learning where to set things down so they did not have to be carried everywhere. The sun dipped lower, touching the garden with a final warmth before easing away. Shadows lengthened, then softened. Max did not move. Neither did Raymond. They stayed until the light changed again, and the quiet proved it could be trusted. And in that quiet, earned, shared, and unforced, Raymond found what he had not known how to ask for. Not miracles, not endings, just a second chance that arrived softly and stayed. When everything quiets down, what remains is rarely the noise of what was survived. It's the gentler weight of what stayed. The steady presence beside us when answers were thin, when strength didn't look like victory, and courage didn't announce itself out loud. In those spaces, loyalty isn't a promise spoken. It's a choice repeated without witnesses. There's a particular kind of kindness that lives in small, ordinary moments. It doesn't rush in to be seen. It waits. It listens. It holds its ground when leaving would be easier. And over time, it reshapes the people who stand close enough to feel it. Not all wounds disappear, but they soften. Not all doubts leave, but they learn to rest. Some stories don't end when the mission does. They linger in the way we breathe more easily afterward, in the way we notice light again, in the quiet confidence that grows when we remember that even in our tiredness, something good can still choose to stay. That hope doesn't always arrive loudly, but it arrives. If this story stayed with you, even gently, you're welcome to stay a little longer too. There are more moments like this waiting here, ready when you are.